Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, we left out a couple. I'm also junior vice of the American Legion Post 84, and I have many hats. Just ask my wife. They're all stacked up on my dresser. So depending on what organization I have to go out that day, there's a different hat, literally. So here's my Patriot Radio hat. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Patriot Radio and why I started it. First, I want to talk about what's called the greatest generation. Everybody here has heard that term before, right? Tom Brokaw made that famous. Men and women that began their lives following the 19th century into the 20th century grew up experiencing World War I, the Great Depression, and even the beginnings of World War II. Life was very hard, but technology was at a frantic pace. That generation went from walking and horse and buggy to mass transit, trains, automobiles. They witnessed the telegraph change into the telephone. The gas lights made way for electricity. Gossip and newspapers shifted into a big metal and wooden box called the radio. A few familiar names you might remember: Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla. I'm going to screw this one up. Guglielmo Marconi. I'll just say Marconi, everybody knows that name. Radio Corporation of America, RCA. National Broadcasting Company, NBC. America Telephone and Telegraph, AT&T. Westinghouse. Columbia Broadcasting System, CBS. And something called the Red and Blue Networks. If you listen to radio way back in those days, you know what the Red and Blue Networks were. The 20s, 30s, and 40s saw an explosion of radio. The sales went through the roof, just like TVs did, and cell phones, and everything else new. It goes crazy. Manufacturers of these radios jumped at the chance to market products. And they used the radio to create advertisements. Not only advertisements, they actually sponsored the shows. So without a sponsor, there would be no show. And who remembers Little Orphan Annie? Do you remember what product, when Orphan Annie first came out, was the featured product? Ovaltine. Lum and Abner came around, brought another product called Horlicks. Bing Crosby was sponsored by Philco Electronics. Others came along: Bob Hope, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin. Actually, I forgot, I brought slides. There's my logo. All right, we'll stay right there. Judy Garland, Louis Armstrong, Paul Whitman, Glenn Miller, Shirley Temple. Other shows like The Lone Ranger, The Green Hornet, Blondie, Father Knows Best, Ozzie and Harriet, Gunsmoke. You remember the TV shows. Well, before the TV show, there was a radio show. And sometimes the actors would move from radio to the television. Not all the time. Some people have a face for radio. Other shows like Dragnet, The Shadow, and many more found massive success, not only on radio, but when they came to television. Huge. So you're saying, what does a kid born in 1969 have to do with old-time radio? Well, my mother was 40 years old and said I was not an accident.
You were surprised.
She swears by it to this day. My brothers were 12 and 14 years older than me, so I was definitely a surprise. Anyway, having parents that lived through the 20s, 30s, and 40s, our household was different. I was raised in a very traditional manner for that time period. Very strict, but a loving household. We used belts and brushes. Actually, you were sent to go get it. Some of you know what I'm talking about. My father often played his old records, and I still have his stack of old records, and they're dated from the 1920s and 30s, when he was just a young boy. And none of this had any impact whatsoever until 2010, when my already bad knee gave out at work, which to this day has caused many problems. But it caused a long period of time of being bedridden and multiple operations. When you're bedridden and in poor health, there's not much to turn to except a caregiver, which happened to be my wife, and a television set. And you can only watch every episode of Bonanza so many times, which I did. The entire series of Bonanza. I could tell you if part of it comes up, I could probably tell you what happens. But being laid up in bed, not being able to sleep but for short periods of time, I wanted to listen to something, but I didn't want to just listen to music. And I remembered listening to some of those old shows, like I just mentioned, Lone Ranger and things like that. And I said, how am I going to possibly be able to listen to that? So I had extra time on my hands, and I had a computer, and I went and created a radio station. If you click. So yeah, this was actually my 5th surgery. It was very simple, just in and out. I was walking immediately, ready to go back to work. 5 days later, my knee blew up about this big from a staph infection, which altered the course of my life and my family's life. I'll save you the other photos. You don't need to see those.
Thank you.
But, next slide. So here's how you do it. Simple. Find a good name. You register the domain. You build the website. Collect over 250 gigabytes of programs from the public domain. Find an internet service to host the station. Then you program it. You test it. You debug, fix, repeat over and over and over again. And then connect the station to multiple hosting services to spread the links. Sounds easy, right? When you have time on your hands, you learn all this stuff. All right, next slide.
You must have really been tired of Bonanza.
I still enjoy it, though. I've built basically a timed station where every program, I know it's hard to see, but every program has a time slot, plays every single day at the same time. So, and the only change, and I'll cover it more, is Sunday nights, and I'll get into that in a short bit. All right, next slide. Here are some of the shows that I featured: Ozzie and Harriet, Gunsmoke, Father Knows Best, Suspense, all sorts of different music. The Martin and Lewis Show. Did you know they had their own radio show before they were a TV hit? And this is just a small example of some of the shows that I have. Now it's streaming internet. It's different than AM/FM. AM/FM, everybody knows that. You go to your car, turn the dial, punch a button. Streaming internet's a little bit different. It runs on a computer, and it broadcasts worldwide. You can access it from my website, but there's also some apps, free apps you can download on your phone. One such app is called TuneIn. You download TuneIn. All you do is search for Patriot Old Time Radio, save it as a favorite, and you can take that anywhere you go on your phone. And your phone doesn't have to be on. You can actually turn the screen off, and it keeps playing. And if anybody has Alexa at home, I didn't say that too loud, right? Because whenever you say it, you know somebody has it at their house. If you have Alexa in your house, you can actually connect Alexa to TuneIn and just tell Alexa, play Patriot Old Time Radio, and boom, it plays. Actually, when we launched a show that I'll cover in a few minutes, I invited a bunch of people over, and we had like a little launch party, and we played it over the Alexa in the house. Half train will travel. All right, next slide. Oh, here's some more examples of singers. I covered some, but you may recognize some of these names. They were huge names back in the day. And actually, to this day, if you listen to old time radio, these are many of the names you're going to see. Next slide. Here's some of the compilations, the programs that were very popular. Alka-Seltzer Show, that was always fun. Grand Ole Opry, you remember the TV show. Chesterfield, nothing like having a cigarette company sponsor your show. Very popular back then. All right, next slide. For those who fight to protect it, freedom has a flavor that the protected will never know. Quote from General Patton. Now we're getting into some of the new stuff. When I came to Georgia 6 or 7 years ago and transferred my membership to this VFW post and DAV post, there was a few World War II veterans in our post. And you hear some of the stories. And something clicked in me, and I said, I ought to capture some of these stories. Because once a veteran passes on, the stories die. Now, we all seen videos, and we've seen books where the veterans get to tell their stories. I didn't know of any radio show that did it. Actually, a few months ago, you saw two gentlemen here that brought a book, and they interviewed veterans. They actually had a process. They would video veterans, then those would get selected. They wanted the best ones, and it was put into a book. And it was called In Their Own Words. And I was sitting back there somewhere when I saw the name of that book pop on the screen. And I was like, got a copy of their book, looked at their published date, because my radio show was the same name. So I was like, I wonder who was first. We're about the same time, and I never met those gentlemen. So, next slide. So about 2 years ago, I launched a program called In Their Own Words, where I would interview United States combat veterans to share their stories. I took that concept to my post, Grant Reeves VFW 7720, and I say, I'm not looking for money, I'm just looking for a sponsor to give the program, I guess, credence, and to open up where I can market this. And they approved of that. So not only does the VFW post promote the show, but I get to use their name on some of my flyers. So, In Their Own Words was born. We launched, I think it was on Veterans Day, 2018. And I had a whole group of people at my house to listen to the first interview. Next slide, please. My first interview, I sat down with Tom Toccoa from Mount Airy. He was a rifleman during the Korean War. Tom Toccoa did not share his experiences with just anybody. His son-in-law, also a veteran, heard little glimpses of stories once in a while, but Tom didn't open up to anybody. And he opened up to me, and he shared some really incredible stories. And he was a wonderful host. And when I was about to set up another interview, because he wanted to sit down again, he passed. So I was never able to get with Tom again. I'm going to tell you a little bit more. When he passed, because I did the interview and it was playing on my radio station, I also put it on my website. I saved the audio as a file on the website that you could play right from the website. Following his funeral, his family gathered at the house, and together they listened to his interview.
Oh, cool.
Which had a massive impact, not only on them, but to me. Next slide. Don Vickery is a Vietnam veteran, helicopter pilot, and he's still around. I see him once in a while. We talk every once in a while. He's a member of our post. His story was funny. He caught me off guard. I said, tell me, because I don't just say, tell me about your military experience. I try to find out who the individual was before they went in. Tell me about you as a young man. What were you thinking? Then share some of your story. And then I want to know, what did you do after? I get the whole person. Well, he shared a little bit about before he started his Vietnam experience by saying, the first time I crashed a helicopter, and it was like, okay. It was a great story, and it left you wanting more, because obviously he did it more than once. Next slide. This young man you all know, James Ramey. He's not with us today. He was feeling kind of ill this morning, so he didn't come out, but he's usually here. And he's 96 years old. He was a tanker. His unit was attached to General Patton. And you've heard stories of General Patton, and you've seen the movie, and the movie pretty much nails it. Jimmy has personal interaction with Patton. And I'm not going to tell you what it was. You have to listen to the interview. You can go to the website, play it anytime. But he has some wonderful stories. He still remembers them. And they're not all wonderful. But they're graphic, a lot of detail. But it's something that you will not hear anywhere else. Next slide. Here's another veteran that you've probably met, Larry Kinder. World War II, he was an artillery spotter in the Pacific. Korean War, he was an intelligence officer in the United States Air Force. Larry was, he was something else. If you met him, you remember him. He was just a short, thin, wired man. he was full of life and activity, and he wanted to do another interview as soon as we were done. And I got so much information from him that I actually created several interviews, and it turned into more than just a interviewee-interviewer relationship. I wasn't quite his caretaker, but we spent a lot of time together. Let me show you one thing. Larry's book, I bought it just because of his influence, Mustangs Over Korea. Larry had a book, this same book. Every page of it has his personal writing and notes and arrows and highlights, every single page, because he's in this book. He knows everybody in this book. He talks about every plane, every mission. This is a book almost about Larry Kinder, because he lived this. And Larry unfortunately passed on just almost 2 years ago. And let's see, next slide.
Wow.
8 boys in the Kinder family, all served at the same time. Can you imagine being the parent?
No.
Now, I'm not going to walk over there. This is Larry's writing from a picture of an article that he had, telling little details about his brothers. What's interesting is one brother was the aide to General Eisenhower and actually wrote the Normandy invasion for Eisenhower. Eisenhower said, "This is what I want," and he wrote it down. Another brother was killed on the beach of Normandy. That family has paid their dues. Next slide.
Did the rest of them make it out?
Yes. Yes, and he was still in touch with one brother while we were still talking, and he would tell me some stories about that brother. And he was with it right up to the end. This is an event at the Habersham Wall of Honor. If you saw them two together, they were 2 peas in a pod. Let's just say James Ramey would often make it out way before Mr. Kinder. No matter what the event was, whether it was the Patriots breakfast in Cornelia, or the VFW post, or here, the moment Larry saw James Ramey, you'd hear, "Jimmy!" about that loud. And he'd keep saying it until Jimmy would turn around. He got so excited. These two were quite a pair. And boy, you could put them in a corner and they would talk the whole day long. Next slide. Now, as much as he was like the Energizer Bunny. Go, go, go. And when he started to go, and he went pretty fast, we'd still spend time with him. This was the unexpected consequence that I didn't anticipate. I thought, interview, move on. This kind of got me, because I didn't want to interview no more. I just wanted to spend time with him. And I got stories from him that I can't share, obviously, but just being a part of his life was very meaningful. Next slide. This was the night before Larry passed. I called James Ramey, and I said, we got to make a road trip. And I got them together one last time. Next slide. All right. Off to the new thing. So we started something just a couple of weeks ago. How many know what a podcast is? A couple hands. Podcast is usually a few minutes to an hour. Some people keep talking for hours.
Yeah.
I wasn't interested in that. But sitting down with Commander Miles, we said, we have the opportunity, not only for the radio station to put out information, the best way to do it would be to create our own podcast. So we started our own podcast, and I think we're on episode 5, where usually myself, or I've had ones with Commander Miles. I just had one, we went down to Lula for the Fall Festival, ran into a couple of vets down there. They were with Nam Knights, and I got them to do a podcast with me to talk about their Patriots for Paws, or Paws for Patriots. Paws for Patriots. Patriot Paws. I was close. Where they try to raise money so that they can fund matching a dog to a veteran that has PTSD. If you never heard of this program, they can actually train dogs to detect episodes of PTSD before the veteran even knows he's having it, he or she. And the dog can intervene. And the dog could also, as they describe, fetch shoes, socks, take the socks and shoes off. But the main thing is to be able to detect an episode of PTSD and intervene. And they're quite effective at it. Next slide. All right, now we got into something a little different, because I was playing all old-time radio music until I heard somebody, and I'm like, you know, somebody has that old soul, and they sing, and it just sounds like it's from a different era. Next slide, I came across gentleman Stephen Blaine. He's from New York City. I've known him probably 8 years now. And I finally just said, hey, Stephen, can I use your music on my station? And he said, absolutely. So I got his permission to use any of his songs that I want. So what I do is right after the podcast plays, twice a day, 12 noon and 5 p.m., I have almost 40 minutes of Stephen Blaine music right after it, which is new music that has that old soul. Next slide. He brought with him, you can't read this, don't worry. He brought with him lots of reviews. Next slide. He's been well reviewed. Next slide. He's a big deal. Then comes a really big deal. Next slide. Gary Hannan. If you like country music, Gary Hannan probably wrote one of the songs that are on the radio today. He's written for Garth Brooks, Blake Shelton, Montgomery Gentry, Joe Nichols, John Michael Montgomery, and the list goes on. He lives in Nashville. He's originally from South Africa. Next slide. He did a compilation of songs, wrote and sang songs from the battlefield. And this is me and him out in Batesville. These songs he would perform for his friend. He would put together a little concert out in Batesville, of all places. He'd come out from Nashville and perform these songs and some of his top hits. But these songs right here, I actually have a CD over here. When he found out I was speaking here, he sent me a box of CDs with his songs on it. And it's about his experience. He's a combat veteran, but not from the United States. He was from Zimbabwe, which I think is Rhodesia, or was Rhodesia. I don't know. South Africa? He's been there and done it. He's seen it all. And some of these songs are about his personal experience with his buddies that he's watched pay the ultimate sacrifice. And we're going to get into one of the songs. I'm going to play a video he made, actually, for one of them. But afterwards, if you'd like to pick up a CD, we have them over here for $10. The money will go to the Northeast Georgia Mountains Chapter DAB 15 to help us help veterans. All right, next slide. I came across this quote. Couldn't find the author of it, but that right there hits home for a lot of people. And you're going to experience that when you listen to Gary's music. And when you watch this video, I think it'll resonate. Next slide.
It hung in his closet, 364, and one day a year, that old uniform saw the light of day when he marched his hometown parade. His medals shined silver and gold, a rainbow of ribbons on the front of his coat held two purple hearts that spoke more than he ever would say. The sky was gray, the waves were red, the sand was brown and dark with the dead who lay shattered and battered by the sea. In fields of green, on crosses white, in memories as black as the night on the covers of war, painted his history on the beaches of Normandy. That old man, he was my blood, he captured my heart, filled it with love, though he'd sit in his room for hours in his own company. And I never knew what he'd been working on till a couple of weeks after he was gone, and then I lost it when I found what he'd painted for no one to see. The sky was green, the waves were red, the sand was brown and dark where the dead who lay shattered and battered by the sea. In fields of green, on crosses white, lit memories as black as the night on the covers of war, painted his history on the beaches of Normandy. So I booked a flight and I went to that place where I closed my eyes to see his young face. Under skies of gray, where the waves were red and the sand was brown and dark, where the dead who lay shattered and battered by the sea. In fields of green, on crosses white, lit memories as black as the night on the colors of war, painted his history
like I said, Gary's from Nashville, and when he learned that our VFW post had burned down, and now that we're in our new location in Cornelia, he's offered to do a fundraiser. He's going to come down when the schedule permits and put on a concert for us to help raise money so that we can help more veterans. He's going to waive his fees because he makes a lot of money on those kind of tours. So we look forward to that in the near future. And let me catch up. So the radio station has not only been a hobby for me for some time, it's led to some unexpected encounters, like I mentioned, where I connect more with the veteran that I'm interviewing. But, and then COVID hit, where nobody wanted to be around anybody else. But we're going to restart the interview process now. So we open it up to any U.S. veteran that wants to share their story. And I know that's a tough one because a lot of people don't like to talk about their experiences. And I have to somehow try to get it out of them. And I'm a person that doesn't share my story either, so it's, I guess, hypocritical in some ways, but say it's my job to get it out of you. It's not your job to get it out of me, right? But being connected with veterans, it also helps me pass on issues where we can help veterans through the other organizations that I'm in, where I find out that a veteran and their family needs food, or a bill paid, or firewood for the winter. So this is almost like a ministry to where I can point out to the veterans groups, hey, I just came across somebody. And a lot of times the veterans groups come to me and say, we just helped somebody, you ought to hear their story. So it works both ways. So afterwards I'll be over here. If you'd like to pick up a CD, and we're going to listen to it again. All right. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Why don't you give your website so they can tune in your radio?
Yeah, that would be good. I should have made a slide for that. Yeah. Actually, I have brochures.
Oh.
I have plenty of brochures and cards that has an email for me for that website, has the web address, the brochure, low budget, but inside it gives you a little description and then tells you how, the free app that you can download and how to get it onto your phone. And you also, obviously, if you go on your computer, you can play it right from your computer. So swing by, and why don't I say the website finally? patriotradio.org. patriotradio.org is the website. All right. Any other questions?
You did not introduce your wife and your children.
She said, no, I won't.
Happy life.
I did bring two of the five with me, and the lady that keeps me going.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.